Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is DonBest.com. I am Frank Trigg here in the Don Best Studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. And down there in Costa Rica, as always, is Nick Kalikas. Nick, how we doing?
Good, man. Kind of excited about the Strikeforce card, but at the same time, a little sad that it's the last event, so bittersweet.
It's a very somber time in MMA right now. For those of you that are new to mixed martial arts, you don't understand how big Strikeforce was before Zuffa purchased them and brought them over into their fold. A lot of the guys that win on Saturday night will get moved over to the UFC. A lot of the guys that lose will be asked to go find their game elsewhere. Some of the guys that lose, depending on who they are, might make the move over as well. It's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing pans out now that the deal is done on Showtime and Strikeforce is finished. This will be the last card. The main event and the co-main event. The main event is absolutely a great fight. The co-main event is kind of strange. The co-main event was supposed to be Daniel Cormier versus Frank Mir. It would have been an excellent fight. Mir got hurt. Was unable to compete, so they bring in Dion Starring. Now, most of you that are diehard fans don't really know much about him. It's because there isn't much to be told about him. He's been fighting overseas quite a bit. He has a record of 28-7, 14 wins via KO, and then he's got about 7-8 wins via decision and 7-8 wins via submission. So he's pretty well-rounded, but obviously coming from the Netherlands, he's going to have more of a knockout game. Where Cormier comes in with a record of 10-0, 4 wins via KO, and Cormier is absolutely one of the best uprising stars at heavyweight and a teammate of Cain Velasquez. But the most interesting thing about this is the line, Nick, that you set for this. What's the line?
It's outrageous, really. 17-1, basically 1750. The comeback plus 1050 on Staring there, and basically 20-1. Let's say it like it is there, and it's kind of justified according to the betting public. Though we have to kind of keep the line up there. Everybody's going to parlay the heck out of Daniel Cormier. I mean, right now he's kind of built a reputation that he's, to most people, in most people's minds, the MMA diehards, the professional bettors out there, he's one of the elite heavyweights in the world. So he's top 2, 3 in most cases. And with a guy like that, with that much hype and star power around him and ability, we can't forget that, you got to kind of set the lines high on those guys. I mean, we've seen in the past before with Anderson Silva, with GSP, with JDS now, with Cain Velasquez, obviously, after beating JDS. And now you got to kind of include Daniel Cormier in that lineup as well. So outrageous prices, but I think it's kind of justified because Staring's in for a long night. He's really outmatched.
Let's not forget, Cormier lives in San Jose right now, California, training at AKA with Cain Velasquez. These two guys will never fight each other. So if Cain is the champ and Cormier becomes the number 1 contender, they're not going to fight. So Cormier's going to have to drop down to 205. But Cormier wrestled and won a national title at Oklahoma State University. So this is a man that's very familiar with Oklahoma City where the fight is being held. It's hometown for him. So not only is he a 10-0 incredible fighter, his hometown swell, the likes of Kenny Monday and John Smith, incredible wrestlers at Oklahoma State, will be in the crowd watching him fight. So this is a big deal for Cormier to go home and to fight him and to fight a guy like Dion Starring because he's really not up to his par. If I'm correct, Nick, I'm going to have to put this fight in a parlay picking Cormier or just be ready to throw $50 down on Dion Starring and be ready to lose it because there's really no way that I see Dion even remotely finding a way, even by accident, beating DC, let alone trying to put the huge amount of money I'd have to win anything on DC. So should I leave this in a parlay? Is that my best bet?
Yeah, I mean, there's not going to be a lot of value to parlay, but that's what most people are going to do. And I mean, I think you're fairly safe there. Like you said, I think the only chance Staring has is getting the TKO stoppage, KO stoppage, and it's kind of a glimmer of hope there. Not really going to happen there. I think Cormier, even though on paper he might have a disadvantage, I still think he's actually got the advantage over Staring in the actual fight. So the stand-up department, the wrestling department, any aspect of the game, Daniel Cormier should really have his way. I know he wasn't pleased with the line being that outrageous, but at the same time, some of those guys don't understand, man. You got to keep the betting public off these guys. I mean, they're that much star power, that much hype, like I said, you have to kind of make it safe for the sports book. So that's why.
Okay, let's move on to the main event. An incredible main event it is. Title fight for the last fight in Strikeforce history. This will be the last fight Strikeforce ever has, and it is well worthy of being the main event. Tarek Saffiedine versus Nate Marquardt. Marquardt, the champ, is taking on. He could have pulled out. He could have held the belt and walked away the champ of Strikeforce and have it closed off and be no more. He didn't do that. He decided to put it up on the line. He put it up against a very game Tarek Saffiedine. Now, Saffiedine comes in with a record of 13-3, 7 wins via decision. Marquardt comes in with an MMA record of 32-10-2, 15 wins via sub. Absolutely the better fighter overall, but Saffiedine is very, very game. What's the line on this one?
Well, right now it's minus 305 from Marquardt. The comeback on Safin is around plus 245. I opened it around minus 275 from Marquardt. So the betting public coming in that way, I'm not surprised at all. I was expecting him really to come that way because Marquardt, like you said, he's just the overall, he's honestly the better fighter. He's coming from the UFC into Strikeforce. He got the title from Woodley in his welterweight debut, but in the UFC as a middleweight, he was one of the top middleweights in the world. So making the drop to welterweight, coming over to Strikeforce, we kind of expected to see things play out like it is. Now he's looking to get the win over Safin and head back over to the UFC with the championship belt in hand and hopefully get a title shot eventually with GSP. But man, I'll tell you what, you can't not underestimate Safin. Safine's always improving. I mean, his nickname's a sponge, and it might sound kind of corny here, but for a reason. The guy does improve every fight. He gets a little bit better. His takedown defense gets better. His wrestling gets better. He's always been more than capable of stopping people on the feet. He only has one knockout on his record, but I think that's a little deceiving. He's a lot more effective on the feet than that shows here. And I think in a 5-round fight, he's going to have his opportunities against Nate Marquardt, and maybe we could see a stoppage, upset stoppage from the dog. It's going to be hard. Marquardt, like I said, should have the advantage. He should have the wrestling advantage, but I think he's going to struggle to get the takedowns. And on the feet, it's going to be pretty competitive and close. So my money's honestly going to go with the underdog here. I can't lay that kind of juice almost 3-1 against a talented guy like Safin, and that's why. So I think it's really bet the dog or pass in this fight.
Well, I talked to Dan Henderson about Safin, who trains with him, and said, what's Safin's working on? He goes, well, Safin's biggest hole is, if you look at any of his fights, his biggest hole is his wrestling game, defense and offense. So he worked diligently before this last training camp and this last training camp heavily on wrestling. That coming from Henderson kind of makes me lean a little bit more towards the dog as well. But I agree, Nick. I'm either going to have to put money down on Safin or leave this thing entirely alone.
Yeah, you're just asking for it. Laying 3-1 against quality fighters like that, you're just asking for a beat. So even if Marquardt goes on and wins, congratulations to him. He should do that, but I think it's too risky laying that kind of juice.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This is DonBest.com. This was the MMA Insiders. That's Nick Kalikas. I'm Frank Trigg. We'll see you next time.